A quiet question that stopped millions of seniors. Cold. What if a single quiet decision made in Washington could place an extra $2,000 directly into your hands without Congress ever voting on it? For many Americans over the age of 60, especially those living on a fixed or carefully planned income, that question alone is enough to make you stop and think, not because of excitement, but because of uncertainty. When words like stimulus, executive order, and exact date begin appearing together in headlines, emotions can rise quickly. Hope for some, confusion for others, and for many seniors, quiet concern. That is exactly why this conversation matters. Over the past few days, renewed attention has surfaced around the idea of a possible $2,000 payment. Some headlines call it a stimulus check, others refer to it as a dividend. But unlike rumors circulating on social media, this discussion did not come from anonymous sources. It came directly from comments made by the president during a recent interview. And that detail changes everything. For months, the idea of additional financial support had largely disappeared from public conversation. That silence left many retirees wondering whether the help they once heard about was ever truly real. When support is mentioned and then quietly fades away, it creates emotional whiplash, especially for those who carefully budget every dollar. Today's goal is not to create excitement or fear. It's to slow everything down, remove the emotion from the headlines, and focus on what has actually been said, what has not been promised, and what this realistically means for you right now. Why this update feels different from the past. What makes this moment feel different is not the amount of money being discussed. It's the way the conversation has returned after months of near silence. For a long time, the idea of additional financial relief simply disappeared from public view. No follow-up explanations, no official updates, just silence. And for many seniors, that silence was unsettling. When you depend on predictable income, uncertainty can feel heavier than bad news. This recent update did not come from speculation or online rumors. It came from the president himself during a formal interview. That alone is why so many people are paying attention again. It signals that the idea has not been abandoned, even if it has not yet taken shape. During that interview, two statements stood out immediately. First, the president suggested that a $2,000 payment could still happen later this year. Not tomorrow, not next week, but sometime ahead. Second, and this is the part that truly caught attention, he indicated that congressional approval might not even be required. In other words, he raised the possibility that this could be done through executive action. For seniors who remember how long previous stimulus programs took to move through Congress, that suggestion feels almost unbelievable. It creates a sense of hope, but also confusion. And here's where caution matters. A statement is not a policy. A discussion is not a decision. This update represents renewed attention, not a finalized plan. Understanding that difference protects you from emotional highs and lows while the story continues to unfold. What has not been promised and why that matters. Before we go any further, this is where clarity becomes especially important. As of today, there is still no official proposal document. There is no finalized eligibility list. There is no confirmed payment date. And there is no signed executive order. What exists right now is an update, not a guarantee. That distinction may sound small, but for seniors managing limited income, it makes a world of difference. When money is tight and budgets are carefully balanced, assuming support before it arrives can quietly create stress, not relief. It's easy to see how headlines can blur this line. A few confident words from leadership quickly turn into bold claims online. Suddenly, people feel like they need to prepare, react, or worry about missing out. But the reality is far calmer than the noise suggests. Nothing has been approved, nothing has been issued, and nothing has been scheduled. That does not mean the idea is meaningless. It means the idea is incomplete. Protecting your financial well-being means learning to separate possibility from certainty. Hope can be healthy, but clarity is essential. When expectations are built too early, disappointment tends to follow. Right now, there is nothing you need to apply for. There is no action required, and there is no decision you've missed. Sometimes the most responsible move is simply understanding where things stand, without panic, without excitement, and without pressure, while allowing the process to reveal itself in time. Where this idea actually started to understand where things stand today, it helps to gently rewind the timeline. This idea did not suddenly appear out of nowhere. Several months ago, the president first mentioned the possibility of a $2,000 payment per person. At that time, it was not introduced as a final policy or a signed plan. It was presented as a concept, an idea placed on the table for discussion. Almost immediately, that mention caught attention, especially among seniors and retirees. Many people over 60 clearly remember how meaningful previous stimulus payments were during difficult economic periods. For those living on fixed incomes, even the suggestion of extra support can feel like a lifeline. Shortly after that initial comment, the message was reinforced. The president clarified that the focus would not be on high earners but on low and middle-income Americans. That detail mattered. It signaled that this was not intended as a broad, one-size-fits-all payment, but as targeted support for people more likely to feel financial pressure. For seniors relying on Social Security, pensions, or modest retirement savings, that focus naturally sparked interest and hope. But it also created expectations, and expectations, when they form too early, can quietly become emotional weight. This is why understanding the timeline matters. What was introduced was an idea, not a promise, a direction, not a destination. Knowing that difference helps you stay grounded while the conversation continues to evolve. Income limits. What's been said and what's still unclear. After the initial idea was introduced, attention quickly shifted to one critical question: who would actually qualify? Soon after the president emphasized support for low and middle-income Americans, additional comments emerged from within the Treasury. These comments suggested that income limits could play a central role if the plan were to move forward. Numbers around $100,000 were mentioned, but never confirmed, and that distinction matters. For seniors, income is rarely simple. Many retirees do not receive a single, steady paycheck. Instead, income may come from Social Security, a pension, modest withdrawals from retirement accounts, or even occasional part-time work. Some years look very different from others. This is where confusion often begins. When figures are mentioned publicly but not finalized, it leaves room for assumptions. Some people start counting themselves in, others assume they are excluded. Neither reaction is grounded in fact, because the rules simply do not exist yet. There has been no clear explanation of how income would be measured. Would it be based on last year's tax return, current income, household income, individual income? These details are not minor. For seniors, they can completely change eligibility. This uncertainty can feel frustrating, especially for those who plan carefully and live responsibly within their means. But frustration does not mean failure. It simply reflects an unfinished process. Right now, the most accurate answer is this: income limits have been discussed, but nothing has been defined. And until it is, certainty remains out of reach. Executive orders. Why this one sparked so much confusion. One phrase from the president's comments has generated more confusion than almost anything else. Congressional approval may not be required. For many seniors, that statement raises an immediate and reasonable question. How is that even possible? To answer that, we need to slow down and talk plainly about what an executive order actually is. An executive order is not a new law passed by Congress. Instead, it is a directive issued by the president that guides how existing laws or government resources are carried out. Think of it less as creating something new and more as redirecting how the system operates. Over the years, presidents from both parties have used executive orders, especially during times when Congress is slow-moving or deeply divided. Some of these orders are small and procedural. Others can have wide-reaching effects. The debate surrounding this potential payment centers on authority. Some legal experts argue that if funds already exist under certain programs or emergency powers, an executive order could legally direct those funds toward payments like this. Other experts strongly disagree. They argue that creating a large-scale payment program would require explicit approval from Congress. Both sides present valid arguments, and that's why you are hearing so many conflicting opinions. What matters most for seniors is not who wins the legal debate, but what uncertainty means for expectations. Even if an executive order is possible, That does not mean it would happen quickly or without challenge. Serious discussion does not equal certainty, and understanding that protects you from false assumptions. Later this year, a phrase that deserves careful attention. One short phrase from the president's comments has likely stayed in many people's minds. Later this year. At first glance, those words may sound vague, but in the world of government decisions, they are often very revealing. When leaders use language like this, it usually signals intention, but not urgency. For seniors who depend on predictable income, understanding that distinction is important. Later this year does not mean next week. It does not mean a specific month, and it does not mean a guaranteed outcome. It describes a wide window of possibility, not a promise on the calendar. Historically, when government payments are discussed without a firm date, timing often becomes strategic. Decisions tend to align with broader economic conditions, public sentiment, or moments when financial reassurance may ease wider concerns. That doesn't imply anything improper. It simply reflects how large systems operate. Naturally, people begin to guess. Summer, early fall, toward the end of the year. While that curiosity is understandable, it's also where anxiety often begins to creep in. Many retirees say the hardest part of situations like this isn't budgeting or saving, it's waiting, wondering, not knowing when or if something might happen. That emotional strain is real, and it deserves to be acknowledged. This is why planning around money that hasn't arrived yet can quietly undermine peace of mind. If support comes, it can be helpful, but your day-to-day security should never depend on a possibility. Patience, in moments like this, is not passivity, it's protection. Why even a decision would not mean immediate payments. Even if a decision were made tomorrow, that does not mean money would suddenly appear in bank accounts. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of government payments, and it's especially important for seniors to understand. Large-scale financial programs do not move instantly, even after leadership agrees on a direction. There are administrative steps that take time. Systems must be prepared. Eligibility rules must be clarified. Payment methods must be coordinated, and safeguards must be put in place to prevent errors and fraud. None of that happens overnight. Many retirees remember this from past stimulus programs. Even after decisions were announced, weeks, or sometimes months, passed before checks or direct deposits actually arrived. That delay was not accidental. It was part of the process. This matters because expectations shape emotional well-being. When people hear strong language in headlines, it's easy to assume action is immediate. When that doesn't happen, disappointment follows, even though nothing has gone wrong. Whether Congress is involved or not, time is still required. Executive action does not eliminate logistics, it does not bypass systems, and it does not remove the need for careful implementation. For seniors living on fixed incomes, this reality can feel frustrating, but understanding it can also be calming. Delays are not signals of failure or cancellation. They are signals of complexity. Patience here is not about waiting blindly. It's about protecting yourself from unnecessary stress while the machinery of government slowly turns. Is there even money left? Understanding a common fear. Whenever talk of government payments returns, one concern almost always follows. Is there even money left to do this? You may have heard statements like, the government is broke, or there's no money left. For seniors who already feel cautious about the economy, those phrases can sound alarming. But the reality is more nuanced than headlines often suggest. The federal government does not operate the way a household does. It does not rely on a single checking account that can simply run dry. Instead, it draws from multiple funding sources and has financial tools that individuals and families do not have access to. That said, there is an important distinction many people overlook. Ability is not the same as intention. Just because funds can be sourced or redirected does not mean they will be. Decisions about spending involve priorities, trade-offs, political considerations, and long-term economic consequences. Capacity does not equal commitment. This is where confusion often takes hold. People hear that the government can create or move money and assume payments are inevitable. When those payments do not materialize, frustration and disappointment follow. For seniors planning retirement security, this distinction matters deeply. Emotional relief that arrives too early can later turn into unnecessary stress. The most stable position is a grounded one. If support arrives, it can help, but your sense of safety should come from what you can control: your budget, your spending habits, and your long-term plan. Understanding how government funding really works doesn't create certainty, but it does protect your peace of mind. Why you should not change your financial plans right now. At this stage, one of the most important messages for seniors is also one of the simplest. There is nothing you need to change right now. Moments like this can quietly create pressure. When news headlines suggest possible financial support, it's natural to start adjusting expectations. Some people delay decisions, others begin planning around money that has not arrived, and without realizing it, uncertainty begins to take control. But nothing about this update requires action. No application has been announced, no instructions have been issued, and no timeline has been confirmed. Making changes based on incomplete information can create more stress than stability, especially for those living on fixed incomes. For retirees, financial confidence comes from predictability. Your monthly expenses, your reliable income, and your long-term plan are the foundation of your security. Those things should not shift based on headlines or speculation. If additional support eventually arrives, it can be treated as exactly that: support, a cushion, a supplement, not a replacement for careful planning. This is also why staying calm is not the same as being uninformed. Paying attention without reacting emotionally is a strength, not a weakness. It allows you to remain steady while others feel rushed or anxious. Right now, waiting is not falling behind. Waiting is choosing clarity over confusion. And sometimes, the most responsible financial decision is deciding not to make one until the picture becomes clear. What this could mean, specifically for seniors. At this point, the most personal question many seniors are asking is simple: what does all of this actually mean for people like me? Based on everything that has been said so far, one theme appears consistently: income. That focus aligns with nearly every support program we've seen in the past. When leaders talk about low and middle income Americans, they are often referring to households most affected by rising everyday costs. For many seniors, that description feels familiar: rising grocery prices, higher utility bills, increasing medical expenses. These pressures tend to fall hardest on retirees living on fixed incomes. Those who rely primarily on Social Security, modest pensions, or limited withdrawals from savings are often the very groups being discussed. However, this is where caution remains essential. Income limits have not been finalized. Eligibility rules have not been defined, and there is still no clarity on how income would be measured. For seniors with irregular income, such as part-time work, required minimum distributions, or one-time withdrawals, those details matter greatly. This uncertainty does not mean exclusion, it means unanswered questions. Until clear rules are announced, no one can say with confidence who would qualify and who would not. Any claim suggesting certainty at this stage is speculation. The most responsible approach is to acknowledge the potential relevance for seniors without assuming outcomes. Awareness without assumption keeps expectations realistic and protects emotional well-being. The very real risk of scams targeting seniors. Whenever headlines mention possible government payments, something else almost always follows: scams. This is not speculation. It is a pattern that repeats itself every time financial relief is discussed publicly, and unfortunately, seniors are often the primary targets. Right now, it's important to be absolutely clear about this. There is no application to fill out, there is no phone number to call, and there is no form you need to submit. If someone contacts you claiming they can help you secure this money early, that is a red flag. Real government payments do not require upfront fees, they do not arrive through unsolicited phone calls, and they do not ask for your Social Security number by email or text message. Scammers rely on urgency and confusion. They use headlines to create pressure, hoping people will act before thinking. Seniors, especially those watching their finances closely, are often targeted because scammers know people are looking for clarity. Protecting yourself starts with slowing down. No legitimate government program operates in secret. When real payments are approved, information comes through official channels, not private messages or third-party services. This is also a good moment to talk with family members or trusted friends. A second set of eyes can often spot warning signs that are easy to miss in the moment. Staying informed is important, but staying cautious is essential. Awareness is your strongest defense, and patience remains your safest position. Fairness, stability, and the emotions. Behind the headlines. There is an emotional layer to this conversation that numbers and policies often fail to capture. Many seniors have spent decades working, paying into the system, and planning carefully for retirement. Along the way, they were told that stability would come from responsibility, consistency, and patience. So when costs rise faster than benefits, it's natural to feel unsettled. When seniors talk about possible government support, most are not asking for handouts. What they are really asking for is fairness, predictability, a sense that the system they contributed to still recognizes their reality. That feeling is valid. Rising prices for food, utilities, housing, and healthcare affect retirees differently than those still working. When income is fixed, even small increases can change daily decisions. That's why clarity matters so much. Unclear information doesn't just confuse budgets, it creates emotional strain. Over the years, many financial announcements have come and gone. Some became real help, others quietly faded away, and time and again, the people who remained most steady were those who stayed informed without letting uncertainty control their peace of mind. Financial confidence in retirement rarely comes from one decision made in Washington. It comes from habits built over time, spending with intention, avoiding unnecessary risk, and understanding what you can and cannot control. You have every right to expect honesty and clarity. And choosing calm over reaction is not weakness. It is wisdom earned through experience. Where things truly stand and why calm is your greatest strength. As we bring this entire conversation together, here is the most honest and grounded summary. There has been a renewed update about a possible $2,000 payment. The idea has not been abandoned, but it has not been finalized. Executive action has been mentioned, but not confirmed. Timing has been suggested, but not scheduled. Eligibility has been discussed, but not defined. That may sound like a lot of uncertainty, but knowing exactly where things stand is actually empowering. You are not behind. You have not missed anything, and you are not failing by waiting. Right now, the strongest position you can take is staying informed without becoming emotionally invested in an outcome that has not yet arrived. That balance protects both your finances and your peace of mind. History shows us that government announcements come and go. Some turn into real support. Others quietly fade away. And almost always, the people who do best are those who continue focusing on what they can control. Your stability does not come from a single decision made in Washington. It comes from habits built over time, careful budgeting, thoughtful spending, and realistic planning. Government support can help in certain seasons, but it is not the foundation of long-term security. Choosing patience is not giving up hope. It is choosing clarity over chaos. And that choice reflects wisdom earned through experience.